Hey guys, so I'm actually sitting here on my front porch and I'm thinking about how I'm going to convey to you guys literary theory and literary criticism. It's a big concept and we only need it for the next 2 or 3 modules in Moodle. So instead of going into a lot of depth, I thought I'll just make my own video. So anyway, never mind the wind and everything, just real quick. This is the basics. This is the basic idea of literary theory, the basic idea of literary criticism. I have my coffee, I have my notes, bear with me. So your first essay is going to deal with everyday use, and it's going to deal with Alice Walker, a lot of different themes. Don't want to give it away. But you know, in high school when you were asked to really analyze a text, I'm pretty sure you used what we call today formalism or new criticism theory, and that's where you look at the words, you look at what's in the text, you look at the figurative language, you look at the details, and you come up with a meaning of this text just from what you see on the page, just the text itself. So that is important, right? Because that's how we analyze. That's the beginning of it. But I want you to take it a little bit further than that. So in order to take it further, you really need to think about other theories. So let me introduce you to some other theories. So first of all, we just said new criticism theory, right? And you can look all of this stuff up. New criticism theory, just the basics of it. You're paying attention to words on a text. You're paying attention to every word, every detail, every piece of figurative language like metaphor, paradox, especially irony. You're not really looking at what was going on in society at that time. You're not looking at what's going on in history at that time. You're not looking at the economy. You're not psychoanalyzing anything. All that stuff's irrelevant, right? It's just what you see in the text. So that's new criticism. All right, if you have any other questions about this, feel free to call me, email me. I'll be glad to fill you in with some major details. Okay, the next theory that you might want to really consider using is your reader response theory. To put it nicely, reader response critics, they kind of do just the opposite of what new criticism theorists do. They investigate the response that they have to a text. They don't look at the words in the text, basically. It's the reader's experiences in life. So if you think about it, everybody brings to the table their own biases, their own experiences, their own backgrounds, their own cultures. All of this stuff makes a difference when you're interpreting a text. So what you want to think about is you're using your background knowledge really to fill in the gaps in that text. So essentially, a text is different when it's read by different people. Okay, kind of think about that. I know that's kind of deep. And you know, you can take that a little bit further and you can even say, well, I can read it one time at one point in my life. Maybe I can read a story when I'm in my 20s, and then I can read that same story again when I'm in my 30s, 40s, 50s. And every time I read it, I'm going to get a little something different from it. Similar to watching a movie. Maybe the first time you watched a movie, you got one thing, but then the second go round, when the second time you watch that movie, you say, oh, I didn't get that the first go round. Oh, that's really cool. And you're making connections that you didn't make the first time. So that would be your reader response theory. It's how you respond according to your own experience in life, your own knowledge, everything that you bring to the table. That's what constructing that meaning is all about, your response to it. All right, the next one is so fun for me because I'm a sociologist at heart. So I want to talk a little bit about sociological theory. Sociological theory, again, it's different because you're analyzing a text, considering what's going on in society during that period of time. So there are 2 theories that kind of stem from sociological theory. You have feminist theory and you have Marxist theory. So the former, feminist theory. All right, feminists really take on the view of, they ask the one question, what about the females? Right. So throughout history, it's been a male-dominated society, and it's a lot of the popular literature, what we see as traditional literature, was written by males, for males. Right? So feminists say, well, what about the females? Maybe they'll go back and rediscover some female writers that were ignored because of that time period they were in because they were female. But really, you can use a feminist critique whenever you're reading a story. Let's say you're looking at this story specifically from male bias. Right, so I can examine a short story and I can say, okay, maybe how were females treated, in this story during this time period? How does this culture define gender roles? So that's how I'm using a feminist critique. So let's move on to Marxist. Marxist, it's all about the proletariat and bourgeoisie. So what does that mean, right? It basically means the poor and the rich. Marx had this view that the poor would eventually overcome the rich, right? That the working class poor, that's really the whole meaning of it, the working class poor, they're being exploited, and how they're going to rise up and they're going to overtake this bourgeoisie, the rich factory owners and business owners during that time period. So if you want more about this particular theory, or more about Karl Marx in general, you want to go and look that up. He's very interesting. The specifics about this theory, you can use this theory when you're looking at the economy during this time period. Were the poor exploited? Right? Things of that nature. I'm not going to go into too much detail with that one. If you have any questions, let me know. Moving on to a very fun one. A lot of people like this one. Psychoanalytic theory. Sigmund Freud, right? He came up, and some people call it the Freudian theory. Sigmund Freud came up with all of these ideas about how to analyze people, and therefore this theory pretty much focuses on a literary work being an expression of the inner workings of the human mind. So basically, what that means is that you can psychoanalyze characters in a story and their motives, etc., the way you would psychoanalyze anybody else, okay? Which can be fun. Can be a lot of fun, right? Especially when you have characters like Edgar Allan Poe's characters, right? How fun, okay? So if you want more information about that, text me, call me, email me, come see me. I'll be glad to explain. It's fun. Structuralism theory, I'm not going to say too much about it other than structuralism really focuses on the language. It's more a linguistic point of view, if that makes sense. Looking at the language, let's say something's written in one language, and in that language there's no word for this particular thing. Well, okay, if I have no word for that, I'm going to have to change the way I describe it, and in the way I change, the text changes. I might be getting a little too deep here, but basically it's just focusing on a text language, and maybe if it's translated to another language, how does that affect the text? So last one I want to focus on is post-colonialism. That's hard to explain in like 1 minute, but post-colonialism, if you think about it, it has to do with the major colonizers of different countries. So for example, in America, the Europeans were the colonizers, right? The Native Americans that were here first, they were the people that were colonized. So you can ask yourself essentially, the colonizers really wrote history from their point of view. So what about the people that were colonized? That's the essential question here. So what about the Native American voice? What about some literature written by people that were from a certain area before the colonizers came in, okay? So you can look at some works from a post-colonial point of view. That being said, you can ask yourself, okay, well, who or what group of people were exploited, or what group of people were just suppressed by another group of people, and there's a lot you can do with that theory. Just in the United States, there's a lot you can do with that. Also using literature from around the world. So anyway, there are other types. Let me look through my notes. You have the new historical point of view, which new historical is pretty much what it says. You examine this text from a historical point of view, right? What's going on in history at this time, at this place that that the story or this text was written, That's really all new historical criticism is about anyway. So hopefully this gives you just the basic tidbit. It really, what I want you to do, I want this to open up literature to you. I want you to be able to analyze literature using different tools. Oftentimes with other classes, I'll have these funky set of glasses that I put on. I'll put the glasses on. I'll say, okay, I'm examining this text through a feminist point of view, right? And then I'll take those glasses off. I'll put on another set. I'll say, okay, well, I'm examining the piece now through a post-colonial point of view, right? So that's all it does. It just gives you another way to analyze a text. So it's not just the classic. What's in the text, figurative language, the classical stuff that you learn in high school. Just opens it up just a little bit more, kind of helps you understand what you believe about a text. Sometimes we read a text, but we don't really understand what to think of it, or we don't really understand what we believe about it. So sometimes literary criticism or literary theory is just there to help you understand a text. And one more note, when I say criticism, I hope you understand what criticism means. It's not criticism like I'm giving you constructive criticism. Maybe your paper was had great grammar, but you really were not organized and it was awful. That would be criticism, right? That's not the criticism I'm talking about. The criticism I'm talking about is more like, let's say Siskel and Ebert, if you remember movie critics, right? I know they do more of the thumbs up, thumbs down, or 5 stars or 5 bowls of popcorn versus 2. You're not really saying that literature is good or bad, but you're examining it closely, and you're telling what you think about this piece of literature, essentially. You're not giving it the judgment of good or bad, but you're opening it up and you're examining it. That's what's meant by literary criticism. Just close reading of a piece of literature, analyzing it closely, right? Using these perspectives, these literary theories that we just discussed. That is literary criticism. So anyway, this is hopefully this will help you with your next assignment. So again, if you have any questions or concerns, you want a little bit more about each literary theory, I'll be glad to discuss each one in depth with you guys. And it's really, this is a very basic video, but hopefully this helped, and I'll see you guys later.